Alright guys, welcome to the second video in this series. Today we're going to be going over tools and stuff like that. I'm kind of fighting a little bit of a cold that my kids brought home from school, so bear with me if my voice sounds like crap. But we're just going to go down the checklist again, kind of like before. I've got like 16 bullet points here on tools, my essential tools and what have you. And then I also have a 9-point bullet list for supplies, 9 or 10, whatever. And I'll just kind of run on down the list and kind of go from there and rant and rave and all that fun stuff. So let's get started. The number one essential tool that I've found is a pencil and paper. You can have all the tools in the world, the best model tools you can find. If you don't have a plan to go forward with something, especially if you're doing a lot of scratch building, you're going to end up wasting a lot of time and materials. I bought this sketchbook at Michael's, I think it was. It was like $7. Decent mechanical pencil, some good erasers, some circle and square and architectural templates. I like to draw my stuff out really well before I actually get that far. Before I start cutting anything. I don't want to reveal too much as to what I got planned. Most of this stuff's been in here forever anyway, so. And you know, it's everything from my derby stuff to armor builds and stuff that I have planned. So this is that Christ of New Yorker that I'm working on. That was a bumper for the Ford pickup. You know, I got all sorts of stuff drawn out and planned out in here. So pencil and paper. Good erasers will help you out a lot. You can also make yourself a nice little cheat sheet like this. I'll post this in the Facebook groups. This gives you an idea of what scale inches are in real world measurements. Like 10 inches is 0.40 of an inch, etc., etc. So yeah, pencil and paper, number one friend. Get that out of the way. I got everything kind of piled up here to go through, so hopefully it'll make things go a little quicker. Number two, toolbox, storage, organization. I'm pretty fortunate to have gotten a lot of the stuff that was my grandfather's when he was still here. Like this, the wooden toolbox, the machinist's box. I have a really big wooden cabinet that he built, minus the drawer that's taken out for stuff over here for the video. It's a really good idea to keep your stuff well organized and put away. It makes your life a lot easier when you're building, so you're not losing stuff, missing stuff, you know, stuff falling all over the place. There's nothing more frustrating than trying to find a tool that you need and you can't find it because you can't remember where you put it. So small boxes like this are good too. I'm not telling you to go out and buy a $3,500 Gerstner machinist box or anything like that, because mine's not a Gerstner, I can tell you that much. But you know, essential stuff like this. This is kind of my overflow box, my backup box. I got spare vice jaws in there, a bunch of scalpel blades. This right here, until I had this Gerstner box, this was all I had to work out of. It's an old snap-on 1/4-inch drive ratchet box. Get the darn thing open. I bent the tabs back in. For many, many years, that's all I had. You know, I could fit most of what I needed in there. My files, my X-Acto knives, all that stuff. So, little stuff like this to keep your stuff put away, especially if you're in a living situation where you live at home with your parents. If you're a young guy watching this, if you're an older guy like me and you're married and you got kids and stuff, where you can keep your stuff all locked up where they can't get it, it's a really good idea. Really good idea, excuse me. Sorry again, fighting the cold here. All right. And obviously, as far as the tools and toolbox situation go, most of you that are going to be watching this are going to be the derby guys in the Facebook groups and stuff that I'm in. I have a heck of a lot more stuff than you're probably going to need to build model derby cars, because I build so many different things. I do HO and O scale railroading. I do 1/35 scale armor, occasionally 1/48 scale airplanes, as well as cars. I do a lot of armor stuff, so a lot of my tools and whatnot are geared more toward that. So just keep that in mind when I'm showing you this stuff. I mean, you don't need a gigantic hobby room and all the tools and all that stuff that I have, so just keep that in mind. Okay, number 3. Ideally, if you can have your own designated work area, I mean, I know we would all like that, but we can't always have it. Honestly, I never had one really until we're in the place we're in now. I have a nice workshop, and I'm very thankful for it. But keep in mind, if it's something that you do at the kitchen table or whatnot, again, whether you're a kid living at home with your parents or you're married and you do it at the kitchen table, get one of these big cutting mats. They sell them at Hobby Lobby, Michael's, Walmart, all that stuff. They're actually for sewing and whatnot. But they really do save on, surfaces that other people use if you're using the kitchen table or what have you. I have a nice workbench. Nice sturdy workbench would be ideal if possible, but just remember to keep your work area clean, keep it in a safe environment. If you've got young kids that are crawling around on the floor, obviously keep it to where you're not going to be dropping tiny pieces on the floor, etc., etc. So, but these cutting mats are a lifesaver, especially if you can get one at Hobby Lobby when they're running one of their sales or have their coupons. It's a great thing to pick up. So, sorry if you're hearing the sniffles on the microphone, but I'm kind of working with what I got. Okay, so number 4 on the list would be X-Acto handles, blades, scalpels, and a sharps container. I have various X-Acto handles, hobby knife handles, whatever you want to call them. There's a million different options for these out there. I tend to stick with the X-Acto brand stuff. I don't know where exactly I put that my normal knife at the moment, but I've got one of the ones that has the gold colored locking sleeve, whatever you want to call it, I guess. That one's kind of my go-to. I tend to try to keep fresh blades in all of them, but it doesn't always work out that way. I do have a few of these solid scalpel handles too. If you're just getting into the hobby, I wouldn't recommend these because they're really easy to cut your fingers on. Done it a couple times and it's not a good time because when they cut, they go deep. I tend to gravitate more toward the Excel number 11 blades. You can buy them in bulk like this. I buy 100 at a time. That way I don't have to be freaking out that I don't have any. As for like a sharps container, any small metal tin for putting old blades in works. Any sealable container, baby food jar. I've used that in the past. Pop bottle, whatever, as long as it's got a way to keep the things in there so where they're not going to be bouncing around your workbench and getting stepped on, dropped on the floor, all that fun jazz. So you don't need to go out and spend $40 on a hobby knife handle. You don't need to do it, trust me. Been down that road. The things in the garbage, I've got the $10 and $15 ones right there. Those are the ones that last for a long time. Number 5, tweezers. When you're like me and you got, the old Mark I sausage fingers, various forms of tweezers are going to be your friend. I really like the ones that, where's the second pair? That do the automatic closing. So you actually squeeze them to open them and then they'll close by themselves. I have tape wrapped around these ones because they have toothed jaws. And it's pretty, I don't know if I can get it to focus or not, but doesn't look like it. But the teeth are pretty aggressive on them, so I put some tape on there to keep them from chewing up parts too bad. Anything from real blunt ones that have a really heavy spring tension down to really fine ones with a fine point that don't squeeze super hard, but hard enough. Just get yourself a couple different pairs of tweezers. And again, you don't need to go out and buy, made in Germany surgical tweezers. You're not doing an operation here. You're working on models. But tweezers are a big help, especially if you have hands that are like mine where you're your fingers and stuff are not really conducive to working with small parts. The ones that have the bent noses are a very big help too, especially when you're doing interior work or fixing something in an interior once the body's on a car. My bodies tend to not be removable once they're on, so at least not easily. So yeah, that'll about cover tweezers. Take a drink quick. Give me 1 second. Okay. Nippers and small pliers, number 6. I've got a whole bunch of different stuff in here. I'm not saying go out and buy stuff from the Matco and Snap-on guy for this. The Mac and Matco ones that I have were from when I did mechanic work, and the green-handled ones they were my grandpa's. Generally speaking, as far as pliers go, it's nice to have a pair or two. Anything that's basically too small to use in the garage on real cars will work. You can go to the, I guess I wouldn't say dollar store, but you go to Harbor Freight or whatever and get a cheap set of flat-jawed pliers, for $15, and you'll be set for life because you're never going to destroy them working on models. At least the odds are pretty darn slim. As far as nippers go, I have a couple kind of heavier pairs of wire cutters for cutting really big stuff. You don't want to be using your sprue cutters and your part nippers for cutting really heavy stuff because you will break them eventually. I've broke 2 pairs. You know, these old wire cutters like this, they work great for cutting heavier stuff, cutting cages, cutting chunks off of bodies, stuff like that. Anything that's thick like that, you don't really want to be using the sprue cutters for. There is also these little guys. They look like tweezers, but they're not tweezers. They're sharp as a razor. I can't really get it to focus. But anyway, these are a part nipper too. Micromark sells these. They're a tool company that they cater a lot more to like model railroading and guys that scratch build model ships and stuff. But that's a place where you can get a lot of these really good modeling tools for a decent price. I mean, they're not the cheapest in the world, but tools with model building are kind of a buy once, cry once thing, just like anything else. If you buy decent stuff, you're only going to have to buy it once, maybe twice in your life. I'm not saying go out and spend $600 buying tools for this, but you know, decent tools will take care of you as long as you take care of your tools. So that'll about cover all that. The small pliers, the pliers aren't really a necessity, but they're nice, especially when you're doing body damage and stuff, or trying to squeeze something together real tight while you're gluing it. Like those of you that watched the live stream I did on the truck a while back in Doc's group, I had to use clamps and pliers to kind of squash the box of the pickup down. So they do come in handy. It's a good idea to have at least one small pair of flat-jawed pliers, preferably flat-jaw needle nose. So number 7, Dremel and Bits. This is a question I get asked an awful lot. There's a million different options out there for stuff. I'm going to recommend, for the stuff that we do, just a regular Dremel is fine. You don't need to go out and buy the super high-end Proxxon, you know, rotary tools like the dentists use and shit like that. Sorry, stuff like that. I'm going to lump 2 other things into this as well. If you're working with resin with the Dremel, wear a respirator, please, for the love of God. Especially you younger guys that are watching this. I know you old stubborn guys like me probably won't, but when you're dremeling resin, please wear a respirator, because the stuff it really isn't good to get in your lungs. I mean, the plastic isn't either. This is the one I wear for painting as well as doing Dremel work. It just keeps all the crap out of your lungs. So please, if you take any advice from this video, please wear a respirator or at least a mask or something when you're dremeling and painting. The other thing I'm going to lump into this as far as body damage tools go, and we'll get to the Dremel and the bits here in a minute. Lighters and matches. I've also used the small decorative candles, like the ones you put on tabletops and stuff at weddings and what have you, for kind of low heat, kind of sustained stuff when I'm melting the whole side of a car. I tend to not use the Zippo very often. The good old-fashioned Mark I Bic lighter works pretty darn good, so that's what I tend to stick with. But as far as Dremels go, I like my cordless ones. I do have an older corded one that is, it's kind of my go-to when I know I'm going to be doing work for quite a while, because the battery will drain really fast on this one when I'm doing a lot of work with it. As far as bits go, I've got way more in here than I need. A lot of the stuff that's in here is geared a bit more towards the armor stuff and model railroading stuff. Basically all the stuff you see from all this crap back here is all model railroading stuff. All the stuff I use for derby car work is right here. And it's probably not going to focus, but they're the excuse me. They're the spiral toothed cutting balls. Basically like what a dentist would use on your teeth, kinda. Yeah, it isn't gonna focus because it's on video. Sorry about that. I'll post pictures when I share the video in Doc and Bob's group and Cody's group. But again, it's one of those things. Don't go out and dump a boatload of money on the stuff. Cutting wheels are. I use this tool, the thin cutting wheels, more than I use these, because these are only going to be used for damage, and this is used for everything, making bodies fit, doing damage work, cutting cages occasionally, cutting metal, and we'll get to that with miter boxes and stuff. I'm not even going to talk about that. So yeah, a good assortment of these cutting ball bits, as well as, there's not a chance that this is going to focus, but this is actually, it looks like it's just a round ball from where the camera is focusing, but it isn't. It's I think it's a 70-degree head, like router bit. It's actually for like CNC, and it works really awesome for getting down into the creases and what have you on damaged stuff. So you can really get in there and get a sharp line through the crease. So stuff like that, and it's one of those things where you're going to have to monkey with it and try different ones out before you find ones you really like. I recommend starting out with the round balls in various sizes and going from there. You'll figure out which ones you like better, get some that have 90-degree corners and whatnot on them. I wouldn't recommend using the ones, I don't know, again, I don't know if it'll focus, but the ones like this where it just looks like rough sandpaper, these just kind of suck. All they do is build up enough friction on the plastic to melt it. Then you just end up frustrated with crappy results. So I wouldn't recommend those ones. As far as the Dremels themselves go, I do like the battery-powered ones. A lot of guys like the corded ones. Honestly, I've never had a corded one that I can run long enough or longer than a battery-powered one without it getting too hot. When the thing is too hot to hold on to anymore, it's pretty pointless to have a corded one. I do have and recommend the Quick Connect chucks on these. It's a 3-jaw chuck, just like your typical cordless drill. Works awesome. Dremel sells them specifically for these, but I'm pretty sure they'll fit on just about any multi-tool. So I think that will just about cover Dremels and bits. Number 8. We'll do picks and scrapers. This is not something that's super duper essential, but they do help out a lot. You can go on Amazon and find a set of these for real cheap. Not so much these, but these are just like dentist picks, kind of, sort of. Cheap set of these from Amazon will help you a lot when you're damaging bodies. It's nice for roughing stuff in, smoothing things out, so you don't have to do everything with a Dremel. It's also kind of nice, some of these, the thicker ones, It actually works kind of like a pry bar. Works awesome. So a set of those that just have a few picks, just so you got some blunt and fairly sharp end tools, will help you out a lot with body damage. Again, this isn't something I'd really consider super essential, but it will help you out in the long run. It also works good for getting down into tight places. If you're trying to finagle A-arms and stuff around, move stuff around in the interior when it's done once again, these will help you out a lot. And last time I looked on Amazon, you can get decent sized sets of them for pretty cheap. Ones that are like 7 or 8 picks for, I think it was like $12. But, okay. Number 9, pin vices and drill bits. This is one that I feel gets overlooked an awful lot. These will help you out a lot, especially with engine detailing and whatnot like that, or stuff like that rather. When fixing frames and stuff, I will drill holes in the frame, like if the frame gets busted in half, and I'll cover this in a later video in detail. If the frame gets busted in half, I'll drill a hole in one way, drill a hole in the other way, put a piece of brass rod or wire in there, then super glue it back. Well, super glue the wire into the frame rail, put it together, and then I'll actually glue the plastic part of the frame rail with regular modeling glue, which we'll also get to in a bit. You can get pin vices pretty cheap on just about any website that sells hobby stuff. The last one that I had, which I bought, oh geez, I don't know, about 10 years ago now, I just gave away, and the thing was like $8 new, and it came with like 10 drill bits. They're cheap and they're awesome tool, especially if you want to get into plumbing and wiring and stuff like that. You know, adding brake lines, fuel lines, wires, spark plug wires, all that fun jazz. A pin vise will help you out a lot. The drill bits, you're gonna break drill bits. That's the way it is. I mean, as small as the one is on here, that's probably a 24 thousandths drill bit. You're gonna break bits. That's just the way it is. Buy a bunch of them. Don't buy the cheap chintzy Chinesium ones. You know, get something decent, middle of the road. You're not machining airplane parts here, so you don't need the top of the line, made in Germany, best there's ever been diamond tip drill bits. But get yourself a decent amount of bits and practice with them. You'll find a million uses for these. They're great tools. And like when I built this trailer here, these are what I use to, there's actually down this post, there's a piece of rectangle tube on the inside of this post that comes into here, and I drilled holes and pinned it so that to give it extra strength, so that way the neck will actually hold up what's on the trailer. I did the same thing for the top. Stuff like that is what these are excellent for, because you can make things so much stronger and more durable. You'll find it a lot more enjoyable when you can put frames and stuff together that you don't have to worry about falling apart. You can drill holes in the back of resin wheels and tires and pin them to axles and stuff, so that way you don't got to super glue them on. You can pop them off easier if you're doing extra work and stuff. So, all right. Number 10, files and sanding sticks. Another one that gets kind of overlooked. If I can remember which drawer my stuff is in here. Okay. Again, you don't need to go buy super duper expensive set of machinist tools for this. This is just stuff that I've acquired over the years. I actually think these red-handled ones, I think I got a set of them brand new at Goodwill for like $6 when I was 15. Again, it's a Harbor Freight thing. Get yourself some files. I'd recommend a set or two. Find some nice coarse-ish ones, and then find some fine ones as well. This thing I've had for a long time. I'm not really sure where I got it, but it opens up, and there's a lot of really, really fine ones in here, which is really nice for doing finishing work, cage work, stuff like that. So, files and sanding sticks will go a long way. These are sanding sticks if you're not real familiar with them. Also, emery boards, you know, the fingernail files. Those work for sanding sticks as well. I guess these technically aren't sanding sticks, but they work good. I got to put a new belt on that one. But yeah, these work awesome too. It's always a good idea to have a good assortment of sandpaper and abrasives. Files, the nice thing about those is they never wear out. At least if you wear out files doing plastic, I'd really like to know what you're doing. So, so that'll about cover files and sanding sticks. I will lump regular sandpaper in with the sanding sticks too. I've got a big assortment of sandpaper. I recommend getting the wet dry stuff because being able to sand wet is also a good idea. Sanding dry can be kind of a pain in the neck with plastic because it tends to clog up the paper. So, alright, number 11. Okay. This one you guys will probably think I'm nuts for recommending. Because, you know, like I said before, it's not like we're making airplane parts. We're not building a space shuttle. But a caliper, you know, just a cheap Harbor Freight digital caliper of the, you know, like I said, it's nothing special, but it'll help you out a lot, especially if you're building multiples of a part or you need quick, precise measurements. I know cutting cage pieces and stuff, this thing is a lifesaver. You don't need something super fancy. I have this one that was my grandfather's that I use when I'm working with the trains and stuff like that because a lot of the parts are a lot more precise. They're brass locomotives. You know, back when I did machining and welding work, we used stuff like this. You don't really need something like a Starrett caliper to go out and work on plastic models. Something like this guy here, I think they sell these at Harbor Freight for like $10. You know, and this will help you out a lot. It helps me a lot too because I have an organizer here that you'll see in a little bit for my miscellaneous styrene stuff, so I don't have to put the cut styrene back in the sleeves and put it up. And I don't always know what size it is that I pull out of the organizer, so I can just grab with the digital caliper quick and then I know. So the second part of the calipers and measuring devices thing would be metal straight edges and where is it? Now I know it's near somewhere. A couple metal squares. I know it seems silly, but you know, a small cheap machinist square or even like a carpenter speed square, whatever, for doing cage work and stuff, these are irreplaceable. I love this thing. Whenever I do a cage, it gets clamped onto this side here, clamped onto the straight edge here. That way I know the cage is going to be 90 degrees. I don't have to worry about it lining up wonky in the body, none of that stuff. So a cheap square will go a long ways too. And yeah, as for the straight edges, before we get to straight edges, you can get plastic hobby squares, stuff like this. This thing is decent, but I'll tell you right now, I grab the metal square a lot more often than I grab this one just because there's spots on the edge that are wore out. It's just, overall, this is just less handy and less durable than the other square is, and it's also kind of big and clumsy. This, to me, is something that's better for doing, like, balsa wood airplanes, stuff like that. It's just a little bigger gear, a little better toward that. It doesn't really work that good for plastic models. You buy metal stuff, the odds are pretty slim that it's going to wear out. Metal straight edges. This is stuff that I've just kind of commandeered over the years. This is a scale ruler on the back, which is, scale ruler. Decimal ruler on the back, converts fractions to decimals, stuff like that, which is nice when you're, you know, like me, where you measure everything in standard, but most of the plastic rod and square tube and stuff you're going to use will be in decimals on the package or when you measure it with the caliper. Yeah, straight edges, you wouldn't believe how often I use them, even though my stuff's always bent and crooked. Straight edges are good. So, always nice to have a couple. You don't need anything too fancy. Just a couple on hand is a good thing to have. Okay, what's next on the agenda? Oh, yeah, miter boxes and saws. Okay, this one, someone actually just asked me about the other day. That's why I added it to the list. Let me grab them here. Okay. When I'm cutting cages, I will never not cut them with a miter box. Every time I cut a piece of square tube to go in the cage, it gets cut in the miter box. Because, I mean, when they're old and clopped out like this one, no, it might not be a perfect 90-degree cut, but it's going to be a heck of a lot closer than if I try to freehand it. You can buy these things dirt cheap, like I think this one here that came with the saw. I want to say it was like 10 bucks, 9 bucks, 10 bucks, maybe 12, somewhere in there. The only caveat with these is you need to know your limits. I was cutting brass tube for something a while back, pushing really hard on this saw. Probably can't see in the video, but there's teeth here, there's teeth here, there ain't no more teeth here. So I bent the teeth right over on this thing, cutting heavy brass solid stock with it. So you need to know your limits with these. I would recommend only getting them to cut plastic. Dremel and a cutting wheel, use that to cut metals, but these things are a lifesaver when it comes to trying to cut a nice clean square cage. They work awesome. And ones like this, there's 3 studs that I don't know where they are. That's slightly concerning. That you can put in these holes in here, and it'll hold the plastic stock at different angles. There's 90, 67 and a half, 45 and 30 degrees on this one. You can get them that'll cut you just about any measurement you want. But these are awesome for doing cages. I highly recommend one of these. Okay. Again, just don't cut the stuff you're not supposed to with it. This one here, number 13. We're going to get into this a lot more down the road in the painting and weathering video. Whenever that time comes. An airbrush and a compressor. Now, I'm only going to give you a little bit of advice on this because, quite honestly, I don't paint very often. And a lot of that is because I'm colorblind. I'm not, you know, completely colorblind like World War II film colorblind. But like reds and browns, I can't really tell apart. Blues and purples, I can't really tell apart. So I don't paint very often. I do have an airbrush and a compressor, a fairly nice airbrush, pretty nice little compressor. So I can't, you know, I can't tell you go out and buy this brand, that brand, whatever necessarily. What I would recommend for like a starter set is Iwata makes what they call the Neo. They sell at Michael's. If you're looking for one to just do base coats and stuff, that's a pretty decent one. Excuse me, pretty decent one for that. That's about the extent of what my recommendation is going to be for an airbrush. So we'll get into that and the details of it a lot more down the road in a painting video. But yeah, because that's a whole other rabbit hole that I do not have the time or energy to jump down today. So, yeah. Cross that one off the list. 14. Some clamps would be good. I'm pretty sure you can get these at Harbor Freight, Home Depot, Menards, whatever you got around. Just your standard spring tension clamps. They're pretty nice, fairly cheap. Clothespins work too in a pinch. You don't need to go out and break the bank on clamps, but I tend to use them a lot more than I ever thought I would. These ones here are ones that I use for the model railroading stuff. I don't usually use these a whole heck of a lot on the derby stuff, but these are all brass, made in Japan, super high-end. For doing model derby cars, you do not need something like this. You can definitely get away with the cheap plastic, one of these Wolfcraft cheap clamps like that. They make them for like woodworking, what have you. They'll work plenty good for doing models. You don't need to go out and buy something super duper fancy. So like I said, clamps, clothespins, these little alligator clips or whatever. These work pretty good too for little stuff. So I know I'm talking about a heck of a lot of stuff here, but it's nice to have an arsenal of stuff and not, you know, need a whole lot. It's nice when you got a bunch of tools, you find out just how much ingenuity you really have. As you can make really weird stuff work sometimes. So 15, just basic housekeeping stuff. I always have a garbage can in my workshop. Keep your work area clean. Makes things a lot easier. A lot easier. When you got so much of a mess going on your bench that you can't really tell what's going on, which is how mine usually looks. This is probably the cleanest it's been in quite a while. Yeah, it just makes things a pain. So get a garbage can, keep your area clean, especially if you're like I was when I was younger, when I didn't have my own workshop. I worked at the kitchen table or a small desk in my bedroom. You know, so I had to have a dedicated garbage can just for my model shit to keep it all clean and off the floor. So, all right, 16, one that a lot of people don't think about very often is good lights. I have a bunch of lights in this workshop. They're not even all on right now. I have a couple of draftsman's table lights here. Coming from someone who used to work in a pretty poorly lit workshop, you don't realize how much strain it puts on your eyes to work in a poorly lit area until you work in a well lit area. So yeah, good lights go a long way. Anything from a shop light to a cheap 2-bulb ballast light, it works awesome. So make sure your area is well lit because it's less strain and wear on your eyes. So, and I think that is just about it for tools. If there's any questions and whatnot, again, feel free to comment below the video wherever you see it, whether it's on YouTube or in the model groups, or send me a message directly. So, all right. As for essential supplies, now, what I just went over was tools that are, with the exception of like the number 11 blades and the sandpaper, are kind of a buy once and you'll have them deal. Now I'm going to go over supplies. This is stuff that you'll burn through, stuff that you use once and it's gone. Glue, paint, tape. Okay. So might as well just get started. Number 1, since I added this as an afterthought, good styrene. I see a lot of guys that use the for sale signs and stuff for sheet styrene, which, you know, I mean, if that works for you, that's great. If it is styrene, that's awesome. It's cheap, I know it is. I buy the actual styrene. The reason for that being, I know that when I buy this stuff, it's actually going to be the same size throughout the entire sheet. That for sale sign, they don't give a damn if it's the same size, same thickness throughout or not. They really don't. As long as they can print for sale, garage sale, house sale, moving sale, estate sale on it, they don't care. Another reason I buy the name brand Evergreen stuff, I mean the Plastic stuff is alright too, but I prefer the Evergreen. You can buy stuff like this. You can buy square tube. You can buy, these are just like flat strips for like door strap, stuff like that. You can get C-channel, round tube, round bar, I-beam, all that fun stuff. Evergreen makes all of it. And the nice thing about it, when you're gluing this stuff on, and it comes in various thicknesses of sheet, like this is, what the hell is that? That's 15. These sheets are 15 thousandths of an inch. And the whole sheet's 15 thousandths of an inch. And it's cut square. I know exactly how big it is. This one here, I want to say these are 60 thousandths sheets. These are for armor plate for a tank project I'm doing. But you can order them in just about any size you want. You can get them in different patterns. You can get them in like corrugated roof tin. There's a bunch of different stuff. So the nice thing about that stuff too, when you're gluing it on stuff, it's clean. It's going to glue right away. You don't have to worry about scraping the paint off, the ink, whatever. So buy the good stuff. It's easier to work with. It's not that much more than a for sale sign. Order the stuff offline. It's, I think, for 4 or 5 seats of that 15,000 stuff, which is what I usually use for like skin and body panels and whatnot. I think it's like $4.50. It's cheap. It'll last you forever. So I shouldn't say forever, but it'll last you a long time. So that about covers styrene. Let's see here. Apparently I can't read my own handwriting. Oh yeah, glue. I recommend super glue as well as, you know, your regular model glue. The Tamiya extra thin stuff is kind of my go-to for the regular liquid cement model glue. They do also have the quick setting stuff, which honestly I haven't tried yet, but I've heard good things. This is really popular in the model tank, you know, realm of the hobby. So yeah, they usually sell this stuff at Hobby Lobby. I don't know if they're having a tough time getting it right now or what, but it's been kind of hit and miss whether they've had it lately. I stock up on the stuff. If they have it there, I'll buy 2 or 3 bottles of it because I tend to spill it. You don't want to spill this stuff because this cutting mat, it'll make it not have a pattern on it anymore. Don't want to spill it on your kitchen table or anything either. Super glue. A lot of guys get offended when I'm like, dude, don't buy the shitty super glue from the dollar store. There's a reason it's at the dollar store. I've used it before, and I can tell you, buying some decent super glue, you'll never go back to the crap that they have at like the dollar store or Menards or whatever. This is slow drying, gap filling. This stuff works awesome. It's not like regular super glue where you put the glue on, touch your fingers together, and they're stuck together. This stuff, I think, takes, I wonder if it says, join parts and hold, 10 to 15 seconds it takes for this stuff to cure, which honestly I think it takes a little bit longer. But anyway, not the point. This stuff is awesome because it doesn't glue your stuff together right away, unless you hit it with something like this, which is an accelerator, and this will make it dry instantly. And I have another bottle. A lot of you guys that use super glue don't know stuff like this exists, because I've seen cars posted that are about 80% super glue and 20% plastic. This is debonder. This will break down your super glue. So if you got too much of the stuff, you spill it, which is very easy to do with the crappy stuff. You debonder on there, wipe the crap off. So again, it goes down to the same thing as tools. You buy good stuff and it'll work out a lot better for you. If you're buying the cheap garbage, it's going to fight you every step of the way. There's a lot of companies that make the slow and thick super glues. Zap is, honestly, I've had these bottles for a long time. They're like the 3rd brand I've tried, and they're the best one I've tried so far. So any thick CA or medium CA, gap filling, slow cure, the slow cure CA is what you want, because then you can hit it with the accelerator once you got the stuff exactly where you want it, and bam, it's dry. Obviously, if you're, and we'll kind of get into this more in construction videos and stuff, if you're putting glue on something that holds weight, like you're talking about gluing A-arms and stuff onto a frame, you don't want to use super glue, because the way super glue holds stuff together is, compare it this way, okay? You're trying to attach this to this, all right? You put them together, you wrap a bunch of duct tape around it. That's using super glue. So it's never going to be completely tight. You put too much load on it and it's just going to pop the tape and break apart. Now, using this kind of glue, the cement, you put these two things together and you weld them together. So then they're going to be completely tight. They're going to be a stronger bond, because that's exactly how it works. The super glue works by adding a filler material and letting it harden, whereas this actually works by melting the plastic together. That's what plastic model cement is. It melts the plastic together. So just something to keep in mind. A lot of you, I don't want to say a lot of you, but some of you don't realize that, and when I tell you, you're like, oh my god, is that how that works? Like, yeah, that's quite literally how it works. That's why it works so much better than super glue. So, alright, now that we got glue more or less out of the way, oh, one last thing with glue. I keep a couple of crappy old paintbrushes laying around. Excuse me, I have two that are specifically for super glue and two that are for adding large amounts of the liquid cement to whatever I need to, which isn't very often, but when you've got a big seam to attach or whatever, it's a really good thing to have. So just something to keep in mind. All right, tape number 3. Again, buy the good stuff. You don't got to cry about it. You don't got to worry about it, I should say, because I've had more than a few nice tape jobs ruined by using the shitty blue Scotch masking tape, painter's tape, whatever you want to call it. I'm not a fan of the stuff. Never have been. This is the Tamiya stuff. They sell this at Hobby Lobby, and, well, I don't know if they sell it at Michael's, but they do sell it at Hobby Lobby. They sell it online. That's where I buy majority of my stuff, is online. But Tamiya, their stuff is made for model builders, and it works great. So I buy the Tamiya masking tape. You rarely have to worry about it lifting paint off unless you're using really crappy paint, which is also a conversation for another day, because I'm not jumping down that rabbit hole. Pinstriping tape works okay as well. It just tends to be a little stiff, kind of hard to work with on something as small as a model car body. You can use the cheap regular masking tape if you need to. I would recommend detacking it first, like sticking it to the table a couple times and pulling it off, because otherwise the adhesive is probably going to be a little bit much for the paint on the plastic. So, okay, so I think that about covers tape. Oh yeah, and always have the good old-fashioned Mark I duct tape laying around too, just in case. You never know when you'll need it, but just in case. Electrical tape's a good one to have too, because that works like how I have this body taped together. I actually have it taped together with masking tape. The electrical tape would have been a lot better for this, because it actually has a little bit of stretch to it. I wouldn't use I wouldn't use electrical tape for masking paint or anything, but when it comes to holding stuff together while you're working on it, electrical tape works great for that, so keep that in mind. The stretch in the electrical tape will hold the stuff together better than masking tape will. So, number 4, paint. Again, I'm not going to recommend a whole heck of a lot for paint, because I don't paint very often. And most of the paints that I have are older than most of you that are going to be watching this video. I have a lot of the old Flow Quill stuff. That was my grandpa's. This company's been out of business for quite some time, and it really is a shame, because they are some of the best paints ever made. They really are. A lot of what they did was railroad colors, but they have a color called Grimy Black. That is by far and away my favorite color, black. That's this color right here. Those of you that, been around the derby world long enough know that looks like pretty nice for cheater black in scale, right? So it works pretty darn good, but the stuff's like $20 a bottle on eBay right now, because they've been out of business so long. Word of advice as far as paints go: if you are painting inside, I wouldn't recommend using enamels or lacquers. I use lacquers inside because my workshop is sealed up from the rest of the house, and I wear a respirator. If you're in a home where you have kids and you don't have your own work area, or you don't own your home, if you're young and live at home, or you rent or whatever, I wouldn't recommend using lacquers. Acrylics are water wash up, or at least rubbing alcohol usually takes care of acrylics too. would highly recommend acrylics over enamels and lacquers to a lot of you younger guys, or if you're sensitive to the smell of chemicals, which if you are interested in derby cars, you probably are not. I'd probably stick with acrylics for the most part, honestly. I prefer lacquers, but that's because that's what I grew up painting with. Where else was I going to go with that? Oh, try to avoid the crappy 97-cent craft paints at Walmart. Those do have their uses, but as far as, you know, painting an actual car, I wouldn't recommend them for that. I wouldn't recommend them for much else other than doing like diorama work and adding some mud, and we'll get to that in later videos too. For the sake of making it easier on yourself, try to stick with one brand and type of paint, which is pretty easy in today's world because Model Master here, they don't make enamels of anything anymore, which is unfortunate because I really liked their enamel paints. Their acrylics are what I would call probably a mid to low range paint. They're far from great, but they're not as bad as craft paints. Tamiya's paint is pretty darn good. Tamiya's rattle cans are even awesome. Their paint is listed as an acrylic lacquer. To be quite honest with you, I don't use Tamiya paints very often, but as a whole, you know, Tamiya's quality is pretty awesome on everything. So once you figure out how to use them, I mean, I've seen guys that can airbrush an entire tank in a day, which is pretty impressive by any stretch of the imagination. So a good test for a particular brand and type of paint is if you have an airbrush and you're thinking about getting a specific brand of paint, what I would recommend, buy 3 bottles of paint from that brand. Buy a flat color, a gloss color, and a metallic color, and go get yourself a bunch of plastic, throwaway silverware, like from the dollar store, a bunch of plastic spoons and knives and what have you, and paint those colors on those plastic spoons. It'll give you an idea of how to work with the paint, what it'll look like, etc., because there's certain colors where their gloss color paints look awesome, but their flats and their metallics are trash. There's other companies where the metallics are excellent, but the rest of their colors are, you know, so-so. The Model Master lacquers were that way. Their metals were absolutely outstanding. The golds, the brass, the titanium, the burnt steel were awesome. Their regular colors in lacquer were so-so at best. I mean, you could get better results with their enamels a lot of the times, but I mean, that's kind of the history of Model Master. It's kind of so-so as a whole, but yeah. So that'll about cover paint as far as I'm getting into it now. We'll get into paint a lot more when we get to a painting and airbrush video. So number 5, weathering supplies. Okay, so this one is this is a really easy rabbit hole to fall into. Don't end up like me, where you buy a ton of weathering supplies and then never actually finish a model to really use it. The thing with weathering supplies, as far as pigments, oils, and all that stuff goes, there's a million different things you can use for weathering stuff. You don't have to go out and buy all the name brand crap, because I'll tell you what, throwing money at model building isn't what makes you better at it. But like, this is all my weathering stuff, just pigments and whatnot. A lot of this is for the tank stuff, but the rust and some of the mud colors are basically all that work for the derby stuff. But you know, they make like streaking rust effects. It's kind of it's probably so old it doesn't even work anymore. Oh no, it's mixing up. Okay. Yeah, it's a streaky rust effect, stuff like that. A million different kinds of this stuff out there. Tamiya makes weathering powders. This is all ammo of MIG. I've got AK stuff in here. The Wilder stuff is excellent. These weathering powders. Wouldn't recommend these if you're fairly new to the hobby because they can really bite you in the ass. But once you figure them out, they look great. So, and I use everything from the 97-cent craft store paint to dirt from my yard to the super expensive weathering powders. The wonderful thing about weathering is that there's a million ways to do it. I mean, I've seen guys soak steel wool in vinegar and rust it, and literally use that to rust model cars. It's pretty cool. We'll get into that more as we go. I just kind of wanted to touch on it a little bit to let you know you don't have to go dump $500 on weathering products to weather your models. And like I said, we'll get into that later on down the road. Number 6, a good rattle can primer. Tamiya rattle can primer. There's not a whole lot of rattle can stuff I'd really recommend, but the Tamiya stuff is really good. They should sell that at Hobby Lobby, at least last time I checked. The Mr. Hobby spray rattle can surfacers, these are awesome. And what these work really good for is if you're in the middle of, damaging a body, you can, do your creases, whatever, start them, hit it with a shot of rattle can primer, let it dry, and then you can kind of see where you have to go from there. Those of you that have watched the videos with this truck, I sprayed the primer on there to kind of get a look at things, because when you have it like this, where it's just bare plastic, it's kind of hard to get a feel for how it's really going to look when it's painted, because this, even if this looks fairly decent now, which is all I think it is fairly decent, it's definitely not my best work. Even if it looks fairly decent now, once it's painted, if you do a good job painting it, a good paint job will save a model, a crappy paint job will destroy a model. It really will. So it's one of those things where having a nice quick drying rattle can of primer laying around, I just hit something with a quick shot, let it dry, get it all the same uniform color to kind of gauge how it's going to look. It's a real lifesaver sometimes. So I recommend this stuff. It is lacquer, so I mean, if you're going to spray it outside. Dries pretty quick, but it's good stuff. Goes on nice and fine if you use light coats like you're supposed to. It's not like using a can of Rust-Oleum where you're painting the entire tractor in one squeeze of the nozzle. So just something to keep in mind. Number 7, paint brushes. We're going to touch on that more in the painting video too. I basically have 2 containers of paint brushes. I got my coarse, rough stuff, which a lot of the time is used for weathering. Just because I can splatter the crap on there. These big ones, I don't even know where they came from, and I don't think I've ever used them before. And then I've got my good ones, which there's probably more money tied up in this jar right here in paint brushes than I've ever paid for a derby car body. A lot of these brushes are $6-7 a piece. You don't need to spend $6, $7, $10, $12 a piece on paint brushes. At least, not all at once. Pick them up as you go along. If you find that you need one that's a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, bring your paintbrush with you to the hobby shop and find one that's a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller than the one that you need, and buy it. Obviously, be nice enough to let the guy at the desk know that you brought that one in as soon as you get there so he doesn't think you're stealing shit. But I've done that before. I've brought in, which one was it? I had a really itty-bitty one in here. Anyway, I'm not going to spend 10 minutes sitting here looking, but I mean, the thing was as small as the end of my pen, if not a bit smaller. And I'm like, I need something a little bit smaller. And I actually found one that was smaller than that. I wonder if I can find the damn thing. Nah, probably not. Of course, because I need it, I can't find it, right? But yeah, have some good paintbrushes, have some crappy ones. These ones here, these are kind of like the super glue and model glue ones I talked about earlier. These are for stippling that I use in the tank building stuff. It's for taking like filler putty, basically stab it onto the surface with the paintbrush to make like a cast steel texture, like on the Sherman tank here. So paintbrushes are one of those things that have a million uses, and they're a get what you pay for kind of thing. I mean, if you spend $6 on a set of 10 paintbrushes, odds are they're probably not going to work very good, and they're probably not going to last very long. The little white-handled testers brushes you see in the model sections at Michael's and Hobby Lobby, they're not very good. I haven't used a set of those since I was like 12. And I mean, if you're just starting out, whatever, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you gotta start somewhere. But like I said, paintbrushes are one of those things, just like everything else I mentioned, where you get what you pay for. So, number 8, oil paints. Again, I'm gonna get into that a lot more in the painting video. Oil paints work awesome for doing, basically adding depth to any of your paint jobs, as well as they work really good for doing weathering and stuff, adding mud. I use a $15 set of oil paints from Michael's. I have some nicer, higher end oil paints that are more specific for armor modeling stuff that I'm going to order here in a little while. As far as cars go, the only colors you really need for oils are stuff to make rust and stuff to make mud and oil. And a cheap set of oil paints will do that, and we'll get into that a lot more later on down the road in a painting video. But those are just something to keep in mind. Number 9. Stainless steel ball bearings for your paint. I know a lot of you are probably thinking, what the hell is he talking about? But I don't know if you can hear it in there. But there's a small 3/16 of an inch stainless steel ball bearing in this jar of paint. I do that because it makes shaking them, or agitating them, a lot easier. Now, typically when you buy these things, or I lied, it's 1/8 inch, not 3/16. When you buy these things, make sure, I mean, this is an optional thing, you don't have to do this, but as long as my paint sits for the length of time that it sits, I tend to put the ball bearings in there, because generally when I go to paint, it's been a long time, so mixing them up is kind of a pain. If you do order ball bearings to put in your paint, make sure that they're dry, that they're not lubed, because a lot of the times they will come with oil on them already, and you obviously don't want to be putting oil into your paints. It's just going to screw up your paints. So that's just a small tip. What I would consider essential, especially if you paint once every 6 years like I do, because that's how long it takes to finish a project for me. So, number 10. Good idea to have paper towels and or rags. You spill paint, you spill glue, cut your finger open. We've all done it, and if you haven't done it yet, your time's coming. You know, these are just old dish towels that we don't use anymore. I typically have a roll of paper towels down here, but don't know where those went. So yeah, just another thing to keep your work area clean. 3 little things here that I forgot. Number 1, if you eat and drink at your work area, these are more so tips than, you know, really essential stuff. If you eat and drink at your work area, have a lid on your stuff. That's not even just to keep stuff off your desk or work area if you spill it. It's to keep stuff out of what you're eating or drinking. I wouldn't recommend eating at your workbench anyway. I'm eating a cough drop right now, but about the only thing I ever eat at my work desk is maybe sunflower seeds. But you don't want to be getting the glue and shit into your mouth if it's on your hands and you're throwing stuff in your mouth, or you don't want to be getting plastic shavings in your coffee. Keep a lid on your stuff, because 1, it protects your work area if you spill it. 2, it keeps the crap that's bad for you out of what you're eating and drinking. So a better rule is just not to do it at your desk. But that was number 1. Number 2, I forgot to talk about this in organization as well as with the styrene section, which I don't know why I forgot, because it was sitting right next to me. When it comes to organizing your styrene, this is a paintbrush organizer. You can find these at Michael's, Hobby Lobby, whatever. And all it is a spinning paintbrush organizer with pieces of PVC cut to match the lengths. And then you've got an organizer for all your styrene. This way you don't have to throw your cut pieces of styrene back in the bags and hang them up. The only stuff that's in those bags besides the scrap bin there, the scrap bag, which is mostly stuff that's too short to go in here, that's all uncut full-length pieces. This is mostly stuff that's been cut. There are a couple full-length ones in there that I was too lazy to put back in the plastic, but I've got all my current project parts right here because I know this is all sizes that I'm using for other stuff besides the brass. I don't know why that's there. My super glue brush tucked away in there. The regular Tamiya paintbrush. I've got a Sharpie tucked in there. The wood scraps from when I did the trailer over here. This will make your life a heck of a lot easier. It's definitely made mine a lot easier, and I love it. So there was a third thing too, but I can't quite remember what it was. So trying to think, what was it? Well, I can't think of it, so I hope you guys have found this informative. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, need me to go into any more depth and detail about stuff, feel free to comment either below the video here on YouTube or whatever Facebook group it's shared to. I'm sure it'll be shared to a couple of them. Feel free to comment on the videos. If I don't reply to you, feel free to drop me a message. Most of you guys that are going to be watching these in the Facebook groups know who I am anyway. So send me a message or comment on the video if you need to hear anything else. So as far as moving forward goes with this video series, the next video that I'm probably going to do is starting body damage and frame damage. I'm not going to do it all in one video. It's probably going to be broken up into anywhere from 2 to 4 parts. Just because I don't have any video editing software. That's why I do these videos in basically one take. So it's going to be one of those things where I walk you through a major step. That'll be one video. Walk you through a second step. That'll be another video. And third step, fourth step, however many steps it takes. Because I don't have the video editing software, I don't know how to clip stuff together and what have you. So, yet. Maybe someday we'll get that far, but we're not there yet. So, well, thank you guys for watching. And like I said, if you need to know anything else, any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to get a hold of me. Thanks a bunch, guys. Catch you later. Bye now.